Coming in at 5, Abandoned Tunnel, Rochester, New York. The Rochester Industrial Rapid Transit Railway, more commonly known as the Rochester Subway, was a light rail rapid transit line in the city of Rochester, New York from 1927 to 1956. This subway was constructed in the bed of the old Erie Canal, which allowed the route to be grade separated for its entire length. The subway was designed to reduce interurban traffic on city streets and to facilitate freight interchange between the railroads. However, the final day of passenger service was on June 30th, 1956. Now, saying that, have you ever stopped to wonder what an abandoned subway tunnel would look like? Well, thanks to some urban explorers, we now know. This picture was taken by a group exploring the dark tunnels in Rochester, New York, and it gives a pretty disturbing idea about what might be down there. All we can see is the dark, bleak walls and some kind of hazmat suit hanging from the ceiling. Very chilling indeed. Coming in at number 4, Abandoned Doll Factory, Spain. I don't know about you, but I don't think many people would jump at the opportunity to explore an abandoned doll factory. A dark, derelict building with hundreds of molds and casts stacked against the barren walls, over tables and on shelves. However, thanks to one brave urban explorer, they explored the dark halls of this Spanish doll factory in Valencia. According to the photographs taken, the now deserted factory is spread out over 3 stories, with a large staircase running up the main tower. It is a creepy building with even creepier pictures. One man even took the time to warn potential visitors not to go there, citing his fears about a potential curse. I quote, "Do not enter the factory. Seriously, I took a doll's head and a box and I had to return it. Now that sight gives me a strong anxiety. There have been rituals." Now the picture itself shows a row of dolls' heads which were known as bisque dolls. They were at the peak of their popularity between 1860 and 1990 and were intended as fashion items, created to represent women and adorned with wigs made from mohair or human hair. The picture is absolutely terrifying, with some of the dolls having a blank stare while others seem as though they are frowning. Regardless of the expression, these dolls are absolutely terrifying. Coming in at number 3, Purple Garment, Belitz-Hillstatten Hospital. Built in 1898, Belitz-Hillstatten Hospital is a now disused hospital complex of approximately 60 buildings located in the district of Belitz-Hillstatten. Between the years of 1898 and 1930, the complex served as a sanatorium for lung diseases, generally housing those with then fatal conditions. During World War I, it served as a field hospital that treated the earliest casualties of new weapons such as machine guns and mustard gas. During this time, it also treated a young soldier named Adolf Hitler, who had been blinded by a British gas attack and wounded in the leg at the Battle of Somme. During World War II, the hospital went on to be used as a Nazi field hospital, treating injured soldiers. Occupied by the Russians in 1945, it served as a Soviet military hospital for the next 50 years until 1995. The complex is now derelict and is the perfect stomping ground for urban explorers, as you would expect. This is just one of many creepy pictures taken in the abandoned hospital. We don't know who the purple garment belonged to, but seeing it strung up with shoes placed under it makes it incredibly unnerving. I think I would rather not know the backstory behind this picture. Coming in at number 2, Fire Extinguishers, West Park Hospital. West Park Hospital, sometimes referred to as West Park Asylum, was a large psychiatric hospital in Epsom, Surrey. The hospital seems to have been so called because of its location to the west of the landscaped parkland formerly associated with Horton Manor. Now, although it is sometimes referred to as an asylum by urban explorers and the media, West Park was never officially termed as such, having opened as West Park Mental Hospital in 1923. During operation, the hospital catered for around 2,000 patients of mixed class. However, it was slowly run down from the mid-1990s, and by 2003, most of the hospital was closed and derelict, although some buildings, including the New Epsom and Ewell Cottage Hospital, remain in use by NHS healthcare services. Due to its derelict state, it came to be of interest to urban explorers who were drawn in by its sheer size and also the many hospital items still inside, such as beds, kitchen equipment, as well as personal items. Now, this picture from the attic of the hospital is sure to send chills down your spine. Discovered by an urban explorer, they reportedly found these fire extinguishers arranged in a pentagram form. Sure makes you wonder what was really going on in the hospital. However, in November 2010, demolition began on the former hospital buildings. As of April 2011, most of the central buildings had been cleared with only limited number of wards, the water tower and administration building being retained for conversion to apartments. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Dolls, Chernobyl. As most will know, thanks to the popular HBO series Chernobyl, the Chernobyl disaster was a nuclear accident that happened on April 26th, 1986 at the number 4 nuclear reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat in the north of Ukraine, SSR. It is considered to be the worst nuclear disaster in history and is one of only 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity. The accident began during a safety test on the RBMK type nuclear reactor, which was commonly used throughout the Soviet Union. The test, however, failed and a large amount of energy was released, vaporizing superheated cooling water and rupturing the reactor core in a highly destructive steam explosion. In the accident's aftermath, 237 people suffered from acute radiation sickness, of whom 31 died within the first 3 months. To this day, Pripyat lies abandoned, with the Chernobyl facility haunting its landscape. The city had many abandoned kindergartens such as the Zolotozh Kluchik or Golden Key. Now, the thought of a kindergarten so close to a nuclear disaster site is absolutely heartbreaking. The idea of small, innocent children being exposed to radiation which will likely kill them is devastating. However, what is absolutely soul-crushing and at the same time chilling is this photo of a plastic doll with grey hair completely naked except for a gas mask. It appears to be splayed out among the remains of a rusty bed abandoned like the rest of the city, slowly taken a hold by nature. The entire thing sends chills down my spine.
Starting off at number 5, we have SCP-2297. This weather-altering entity has the appearance of your average programmable thermostat. You know, that thing that controls your temperature and your dad won't let anyone touch? You're cold? Put on another sweater. This thermostat is a little different than most. Mostly thanks to the fact that its casing is actually filled with fleshy organs instead of wires and LEDs. The organs are visually similar to human lungs and kidneys, and are comprised of a series of valves and flaps meant to intake and output oxygen. The actual function of these organs is still unknown, and they are highly resistant to mechanical sampling. The thermostat will function as a normal house heater unless it rests face up on a flat surface. This is where things get interesting. When left flat, it will display a message in the format X is normal. Observed messages have included fire is normal, ice is normal, nothing is normal, height is normal, and water is normal. These messages pertain to anomalous conditions that are exhibited in the room in which it is activated. Something like fire is normal will gradually increase the room in question to a spicy 1113 degrees Celsius, while ice is normal will drop the room to a chilly -195. Height is normal actually decreases the air pressure in the room so low that fluid accumulates in test subjects' lungs. Now, you would think that these insane weather effects would cause some distress in those occupying the room, but no. Subjects are not concerned with the changes and do not consider themselves to be in danger. Even when on fire, the subjects claim that they feel normal. This is fine, I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. My face is melting, that's okay. The effects, although not bothersome to those in the room, are permanent and will take full effect once the subject leaves. It's like a time delay on crippling blows to the body. After 4 minutes of insanity, and it's always 4 minutes, the room will return to normal and SCP-2297 will resume functioning as a regular thermostat. So yeah, be careful when you get a new thermostat. Maybe Dad did know what he was talking about. Coming in at number 4, SCP-3154. You'd be best to avoid playing with broken plate glass in general, but definitely keep a fair distance away from this sharp shard. SCP-3154 is a triangular piece of plate glass with traces of human blood from multiple subjects present on and around the tip. Its edges are very sharp, so be careful not to cut yourself. What? You did cut yourself? Well, get ready for Sigma state. This is a unique coma-like state induced on those who are injured by this SCP. The amount of damage necessary to induce this state varies between people, and it often correlates to size, health, and age. Some properties of this state include the absence of breathing and heartbeat, unresponsiveness to all external stimuli, blood settling in lower areas of the subject's body, discoloration of the skin, reduced body temperature, stiffness of limbs, and the cessation of immune system activity. In short, your body just stops working, but you remain alive and in whatever position you were while being cut. And this can get gross pretty fast. Organisms like worms, flies, and microbes in the environment can start to consume your body, and foul odors manifest pretty quickly. You begin to physically change as well, with symptoms like sagging skin, hair loss, and more. It's kind of like you're a standing corpse. Refrigeration and preservative chemicals can help delay these symptoms, but the Foundation has requested that no resources be wasted on this. Sigma state is non-reversible, so they've stopped testing ways to preserve subjects. Sheesh, that's cold-blooded, but I guess so are people in Sigma state. Number 3, SCP-1731. I love this one just because of a phrase coined in the report. Fridge ritual. Name a better two-word phrase, I dare you. This SCP is a fridge spray-painted red with a variety of objects attached to its outer surface. They include cell phones, skeletal remains of mammals, and an unidentified human foot. Unless the ritual is performed, it functions just like a normal fridge. And it is likely that is how it will function from now on, as the ritual is extremely specific. There are 100 steps to complete this, all detailed in a handwritten set of instructions. Allow me to outline a few of the steps highlighted in the report. Draw a perfect circle with a diameter of exactly 46.345 meters in the middle of a barren patch of farmland around the fridge, and write the words "Je ne suis pas mort" anywhere within it. Make a man with dirty blonde hair and no left hand stand in the middle of the circle. Make the man drink until he can't anymore. Take 7 roses, douse them in gasoline, set them aflame with a fire used to burn gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Stick 6 plastic forks into the ground in the shape of a hexagram. You get the idea. It would take a lot of planning to make this ritual happen. No accidental demon summonings through this fridge. It was originally discovered when the Foundation heard reports of a group conducting a fridge ritual in the area. Again, love that phrase. I think I'm gonna start calling the process of loading groceries into my fridge a fridge ritual. So what happened was they found around 100 people running through the steps to the ritual. The fridge was emitting red light and autonomously opening and shutting its doors really quickly. The Foundation shut down the ritual and took the fridge into custody. Once safely contained, experiments were done to see the full extent of the ritual. There were some accidental deaths of animals, Foundation personnel, and researchers, but in the end they made it all the way to step 100. Around step 50, a large amorphous entity started to emerge while speaking an unknown language. This compelled everyone within 10 meters to chant in that same tongue. However, it's around this point that the fridge often falls over and the ritual ends. But step 100 was indeed completed and subsequently marked safe, as long as nobody else tests it out. Coming in at number 2, SCP-2590. Apparently, semi-trucks have deep ties to American horror. Stephen King wrote that short story. Countless horror movies set up hitchhiker murder plots using long-haul drivers. And there's even that episode of Bob's Burgers where the Belchers almost get splattered by an angry, tiny trucker. SCP-2590 is a semi-trailer truck from International ProStar Day Cab with an attached trailer. No license plates, no identification. The manufacturer claims to have no knowledge of producing a vehicle like this. It appears to be driven by a humanoid figure without any identifying physical features. We'll call him SCP-2590-1. 2590-1 looks like a shadow and has unknown significance to the functioning of the truck itself. However, it will wipe the memories of people approaching it on foot, leaving it unquestioned at the current moment. The truck and driver can selectively interact with tangible objects, which means that it can pass through physical matter. As such, it has yet to be contained by the Foundation and is still at large. Since first being observed, the truck has not refueled or broken any traffic laws. How considerate. Every once in a while, it will park and pop open the trailer for 60 seconds. While the doors are open, the trailer will be occupied by a single, unique object. No repeats. Some objects that have been observed are a Kit Kat Chunky, an unlabeled VHS tape, a human male, an eyeball, and a steel slab with a Foundation logo dripping blood. It's tough to discern a pattern. No one has been able to enter the trailer due to an invisible barrier, although on occasion the item will be ejected. One case in particular led to the deaths of 2 Foundation agents when the steel slab was ejected along with a huge amount of blood at 190 kilometers per hour. If only it were the Kit Kat Chunky instead. And finally, number 1. SCP-251. Picking up on some serious Krampus vibes with this one. SCP-251 is a seemingly average small snow globe. However, it is partially animate, as looking at photos taken over time reveals that the scene inside changes. When viewed directly, there is no apparent movement aside from the perpetual blizzard. Since being locked in its container, the globe has not been moved, but the fake snow inside is always agitated. The scenes displayed in our crystalline globe are always violent or morbid, ranging from the fantastical to realistic brutality. Some examples of observed scenes are a man with a briefcase running from a giant spider, 2 police officers preparing to shoot a man execution style, and a couple of men in overalls tossing children into a well. Not your typical rosy-cheeked Christmas cherubs, huh? All who have been left alone with the globe have later displayed extreme violence, xenophobia, and emotional distress. Therefore, anyone left alone in the container is to be treated as violently hostile and terminated with extreme prejudice. Because of these effects, the container is always guarded by armed personnel. Sometimes the sounds of screaming, gunfire, and fires can be heard from within. This is normal. All that's missing are some Christmas carolers singing the standards. Nothing cozier than some festive music, a crackling fire, and carnage.
Number 5. The Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult. Owned by a couple, Dana and Greg Newkirk, who realized one day that they had a passion for the paranormal and a collection worth boasting about, they opened a museum with the intention of getting people to experience the paranormal as close as they could. The thinking being that we don't usually get to experience it up close, this museum provides a one-of-a-kind horror experience. Some of the gems of the collection include a piece of the real-life Amityville horror house, the infamous haunting, or how about the Catskills crone, a terrifying hand-carved idol of a human with nails jammed into the eyes, allegedly tied to a supernatural entity called the crone. The Restless painting, a cursed painting notorious for flinging itself across rooms, or if that's all not enough for you, perhaps the terrifying begging bowl, an ancient Tibetan offering made out of a human skull, designed for rituals where the offerer would feed the skull wine, bread, and blood in exchange to temper the raging spirits of demons for good fortune. Now, there's no question the Traveling Museum is one of the most unique collections on the planet, and lucky for you, it's always moving. But if you're looking for good scares, you don't need to travel anywhere, because you already know the best scares are coming to you twice a day, every day at Top 5 Scary. Stay subscribed and stay scared. Number 4. Zaffy's Museum of the Paranormal. Now, for most of us, we probably wouldn't think of mixing cursed items in with the decor. I wouldn't want to bring that dark energy home with me. I get enough bad vibes as it is. Well, for John Zaffis, he welcomes it with open arms. What kind of person would want to do that? Well, if I told you that Zaffis was the nephew of Ed and Lorraine Warren, would it make a bit more sense? Feeling inspired by his aunt and uncle, Zaffis too became a collector of the paranormal and an investigator of the unknown. Must run in the family. He worked alongside his aunt and uncle on several of their cases where he was tutored by them in the ways of the paranormal, leading him to become a respected hunter in his own right. Following in their footsteps, he opened his own museum of his own demonic relics. His collection includes souvenirs from the cases he's worked on in the past, much like his relatives. Some highlights of the collection include a black cast iron human skull that was discovered inside an unnamed political family's house, a black idol that was used for satanic rituals, a sword that was apparently used to conjure black magic, and a whole lot more. Now don't worry, everything Zaffy's taken in is safe, it's been cleansed, and he's very careful with his vetting process. Apparently anything too cursed for him to feel safe bringing into the museum, he throws into a body of water. So just be careful swimming around the museum, I suppose. Now the museum is currently closed, but Zaffis is searching for a new location to open up again soon. Hopefully somewhere with some nice thick walls. Keep all that evil energy in check. Number 3. The Museum of Death. Well, that's a cheery name, isn't it? You have to imagine with a name like the Museum of Death, there's something suspicious going on. Nope, not particularly. It's owned by a very cheery couple who built it in 1995 in the city's first mortuary. Their intended mission is to make people happy to be alive, which actually is very terrifying and ominous in a sort of Jigsaw, cherish your life sort of way. It's intended as a commemoration of life, just with a heavy focus on the last stage of life. It serves as a grim look at death, although the owners insist they don't want to scare anyone, but they're not trying to sanitize death either. Instead, they choose to show the reality of it, all the grisly details and all. As such, The museum is a site of controversy for quite some time, as some people find the exhibits a bit extreme. Some people go so far as to say it's tasteless, with footage of autopsies being shown and a collection of all sorts of relics from some of the evilest of evil criminals, Jeffrey Dahmer to name one. The museum boasts an impressive collection of bones, skulls, coffins, ancient morticians' tools and execution equipment, and all manner of macabre curios guaranteed to leave you feeling uneasy. Now, it should be noted, the museum is absolutely not at all for those with a squeamish stomach, and really should be reserved for those with a real dark interest in the dead. Number 2. Ed and Lorraine's Occult Museum. Now, it's hard to talk about a list of cursed museums full of the devil's objects without mentioning the Warrens' legendary Museum of the Paranormal. It almost goes without saying. It's probably one of the most famous haunted collections on the globe. Ed and Lorraine were storied demonologists, and the chances are extremely good. If you've even seen 2 videos by us, you've probably heard about them a million times. But it's still one of the coolest museums of cursed objects on the planet and is packed to the gills. It would be just wrong to leave it out of this list. Although the pair have since passed a while ago, the museum is now upheld by their son-in-law, Tony Spera, who carries on the mantle for them. The museum sits in a large shed just outside the Warrens' former property. I guess it's best to keep the evil close to home. The museum houses all sorts of dark souvenirs from the Warrens' storied past and is a veritable who's who for Conjuring and Warren fans. You can get a chance to get up close and personal with the real Annabelle, snap a selfie with her if you dare, or take a look at the cursed shadow doll made of real human teeth and bird feathers, or perhaps a satanic idol retrieved from the woods that caused Lorraine to become violently ill when brought in. If the Warrens were on the case, then they've brought something back sitting on that shelf. Mr. Spera blesses everyone who visits the museum before entry, just in case there's any residual evil hanging around in the air you might be bringing in. A priest comes by too to bless all the items, keep them safe. The museum is currently closed to visitors, but Spera is working hard to have this piece of paranormal legacy reopened once again. Number 1, Zak Bagans' Haunted Museum. Now, if you're looking for the cream of the crop, if you're looking for the peak of the haunted museum circuit, well, then no one has worked harder for that distinction than Zak Bagans, the esteemed paranormal investigator and ghost adventure star. Zak's collection started when he was a young boy, when he would scour garage sales with his mom in hopes of finding strange occult objects. I wonder how often he was finding occult objects at garage sales. Since then, a lifelong obsession would eventually turn into one of the most impressive hoards of spooky finds under the sun. The museum is in Las Vegas, built on a property in 1938 that has been said to be home to dark spirits who pass there, and their energy remains behind. Before becoming a museum, it's rumored that it used to be home to secret orders that would perform dark rituals. Among some of Zak's more treasured haunted items are the Dybbuk box, a wine rack said to be home to the world's most malevolent poltergeist, a possessed rocking chair from the famous Glatzel case, inspiring The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and tons of relics from the world's most sinister criminals like Ed Gein or Ted Bundy. Now, it goes without saying that a building replete with haunted items is a melting pot for spirits and haunting sightings. The tour warns you and asks you to sign a waiver before entering that you're knowingly putting yourself at risk of endangerment from unknown forces. Now, staff at the museum have reported everything from seeing strange lights, shadows, hearing peculiar noises, feeling unwell around certain objects, all the way to real extremes like seeing mysterious figures and cloaked, robed people at night. If you're feeling up for it and you want to feel like a paranormal investigator yourself, the museum also offers solo tours at night with nothing but a flashlight to guide you. Just be aware of what you're going up against.
Number 5 on this list is Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is one of the most haunted and cursed dolls on the entire planet. Ghosts and Gravestones says the story of Robert the Doll dates back to the early 1900s when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everybody called Gene, named the doll Robert and quickly became attached to his new friend. The home where Eugene lived, now called the Artist's House, is located at 534 Eaton Street and was built between 1890 and 1898. It was here that Eugene was given Robert the doll and where a friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime and beyond was forged. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old, awoke to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she was finally able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the doll sitting at the foot of the bed. And all the child could say was Robert did it. Now, this was the first instance where Robert was acting up, but there have been tons of experiences since then where this doll is just doing things that really shouldn't be doing. He now lives in East Martello, where visitors flock to see him, although it's a bad idea. There are letters and notes all around Robert from people that have come to see him, all begging for Robert's forgiveness. Apparently, taking a picture of Robert without his permission will cause him to start to haunt you. This curse has affected hundreds to thousands of people, and they all usually end up coming back to Robert begging for freedom from this curse. At this point, paranormal investigators have learned that messing with Robert really isn't the best idea, and just leaving this doll alone probably the smartest thing to do. Number 4 on this list is the screaming skull. Last I checked, if there is no meat on the bone, then a skull shouldn't be screaming. That's kind of what's going down with this one extremely haunted skull in Burton Agnes Hall, England. Instablog says, what if you touch an object and then you hear terrible, deafening screams? That is precisely what happens when you touch this skull at an Elizabethan manor in England. Burton Agnes Hall is the house of Catherine Ann Griffith, who was brutally murdered by numerous bullies in 1620. Her skull still rests inside the house. Why? Because whenever somebody tried to take it out of the house, what happened next terrified them to the bone. People who have tried to touch or disturb that skull have reported seeing a scary ghost walk in and utter a deafening scream. This scared the people so much that they actually ran out of the house in terror. If you're up for a scary challenge, then this might be your chance to prove your mettle to the world, but for the weak-hearted ones, it's wise to stay away. And yeah, guys, I mean, I agree with that article right there. Probably best not to mess with this thing. I mean, a bunch of paranormal investigators won't even go here anymore. If a bunch of paranormal investigators think that this area is too scary for them, then sorry guys, I'm tapping out. It's way too scary for me too. Number 3 on this list is the Maori warrior masks. Now, these warrior masks hold a curse that won't affect everyone, just a small portion of people. Specifically, women who are soon to be expecting children. The Occult Museum says New Zealand's Maori warriors are part of an ancient tribe who would carve unique masks when it was time for battle. When a man died in the mask, it was believed that his soul would remain trapped in the mask they were wearing. Although their mythology does not dictate that any harm is done by the trapped souls, the presence of the masks has a strange and sometimes fatal effect on pregnant women. Women who are expecting often experience complications when they come in contact with the masks. It's unknown why this phenomenon occurs, but the museum that holds the remaining masks posts a warning that pregnant women should stay away. The literal museum is out here warning pregnant women not to come. That's how you know that this thing's seriously dangerous. Like, whenever a business or enterprise does something that's actually gonna lose them money, that's when you have my attention. Considering they just lost an entire demographic of people, I'm now listening and buying into this curse. The paranormal investigators who aren't pregnant have taken a look at this, and they're having a hard time getting to the bottom of it. Some people have suggested that the Maori tribe thought that pregnant women were taboo, but that also doesn't really make any sense, because then how would they have repopulated their tribe? Regardless of why it is the way that it is, just know that if you are expecting, that's not the right time to take a look at these masks. Number 2 on this list is the Surrey Ghost Car. So this is a weird one and definitely something that paranormal investigators are a bit spooked by. List 25 says crashes are common on the A3 highway in England, so it looked like a routine matter when police in Surrey received calls that a car had veered off stop the A3 with its headlights blazing. But when officers went to investigate, they found no signs of the reported vehicle. However, a further search revealed chilling results. Just 60 feet from the reported crash scene, and buried in twisted undergrowth, was the remains of a wrecked car containing a decomposing body of a young man who, as the police estimated, had crashed there 5 months earlier. Therefore, what the witnesses reported might have been a ghostly apparition of the original car. Now, how on earth does that make any sense at all? You know what, let me answer that for you. It doesn't. First off, how did no one notice this car earlier? And then, what was that ghostly apparition that had a car veer off the road? Paranormal investigators are all scared of this one because who knows what type of effect this ghost car could have on your vehicle. And finally, number 1 on this list is the cursed mirror. This mirror isn't just cursed with a bad reflection, it's gonna show you something a lot worse than just you with a little bedhead or something. Instablog says, if you've seen Oculus, then chances are already you're scared of mirrors. And let's not even go back to the time when Bloody Mary was a whole thing. But if these creepy images of mirrors in the horror genre weren't enough, here's a real object which is most likely cursed. In St. Francisville, Louisiana, there's a plantation house which is one of the most haunted houses in America. Inside the house is this mirror, a cursed mirror. Legend goes that the plantation slave brutally killed the owner of the house, named Sarah Woodruff, and her daughters inside the house. Ever since then, they remain trapped inside the mirror. Visitors often report sights of handprints on the mirror, along with some unexplainable strange marks. And the classic haunting is also rumored, figures dressed in white, old-fashioned attire, visible on the other side of the mirror. Some people who have been exposed to this mirror for longer than they should say that these figures in white follow them around too, that they've even seen them appear in other mirrors outside of the plantation, and 1 or 2 of them have talked about how they've seen them outside of a mirror entirely, as if they were standing like right in front of them. It seems like the longer that you're exposed to this, the more of an impact the curse will have on you. Kind of like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or something like that, where the time you spend among the toxin, that's gonna hurt you more. Obviously, because of this, paranormal investigators don't want to spend too long investigating this mirror. A short stint doing some research probably won't hurt you, although it will definitely give you a scare considering you're gonna see the figures on the other side. But extended exposure is where the real danger lies with this cursed item. Number 5 on this list is the Diebuck box. This is an evil box that tormented many people and even claimed some lives along the way. Zach Baggins writes, according to Jewish folklore, a Diebuck is a dark spirit that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. Legend has it that a Diebuck can be trapped inside of a box and prevented from causing mischief unless the box is opened, that is. Several years ago, the Diebuck box came up for sale on eBay. The seller listed a vintage wine cabinet that came from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The seller, an antique dealer named Kevin Manis, claimed that the first owner's granddaughter was terrified of the box, warning him that her grandmother said it held a Diebuck. After buying the cabinet, he was plagued by a series of unfortunate events and recurring nightmares of an old hag that would brutally attack him, causing him to wake up with bruises on his body. He also experienced an overpowering stench of cat urine in his home. Tragically, his mother suffered a stroke while opening the box. Not surprisingly, he decided to get rid of it. The box eventually ended up in the hands of Missouri Medical Museum director Jason Haxton, who was skeptical about the powers attributed to the box. He soon changed his mind. After acquiring the box, he began to experience a series of medical maladies, including bleeding eyes and strange rashes. He also began to dream of being attacked by an old hag and would also awake with bruises on his body. Kevin Manis told me that while the box was in Haxton's basement, a man died there and his body was found lying next to the box. He eventually became so unnerved by the box that he reached out to scientists and rabbis who instructed him to build a wooden ark lined with 24 karat gold, place the box inside, and bury it in the ground. Now, this actually wasn't the end of the story for this box. The box was eventually dug up again and then later donated to a museum. This was after it had tormented a few more people, mind you though. Now it's fully encased in a glass covering, but even that doesn't stop the evil spirit from coming after people. Many people who have visited this box have reported having serious episodes in the room while they're looking at it. Whatever spirit is trapped inside this box, it is clearly an extremely powerful one. The box remains on display at the museum, but I wouldn't recommend going to check it out if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Rocking Chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair is actually from one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's most famous case, The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach Baggins writes, the horror began in July 1980 when David Glatzel, 11 years old, became possessed by a demon. One night he woke up screaming, claiming that he had been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. David was, everyone agreed, not the kind of kid who liked scary movies or who was likely to make things up, and he was visibly shaken up by this experience. He became rather withdrawn and quiet. His older sister, Debbie, asked her fiancé, Arn Johnson, if he would stay with her family for a while and see whether it would help David get out of his depression. Arn, of course, agreed, but things didn't get better. David reported having more nightmares about the terrifying man who promised to take his soul. Odd scratches and bruises began to appear on the boy, and all the injuries seemed to happen while he was asleep. Odd sounds, which Arn couldn't explain, were heard in the attic. Worst of all, David began to claim that he was now seeing the beast while he was awake. He was always seen sitting in the family's rocking chair, which the beast now claimed as his own. David was the only one who saw the beast in the chair, but family members often saw it rocking back and forth, seemingly under its own power. This was obviously a lot, so the Warrens were brought in to perform the exorcism. The exorcism took place in that rocking chair, and it's thought that the chair itself still has some evil energy from this spirit attached to it. Now the chair resides at the Haunted Museum, but owner Zach Baggins actually took the exhibit down because the chair was simply too dangerous, he thought. Number 3 on this list is the Hope Diamond. Don't get me wrong, guys, I would love to have this thing, but I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze here. Google Arts and Culture says, one of the most famous diamonds in the world, the Hope Diamond, originated in the Kolar mine in Andhra Pradesh, India. According to legend, the stone is cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. The curse is said to have come about when the original diamond was stolen from the eye of a statue. The thief met a grisly end, kick-starting a pattern of misfortune for all those who possessed the diamond. Over the years, owners of the Hope Diamond have befallen fates including death by murder, execution, they've taken their own lives, bankruptcy, and imprisonment. Thankfully, the curse seems to have been lifted when the diamond was donated to the Smithsonian in 1958. Now, I don't really buy into the fact that this curse is lifted, in my opinion. Like, literally, if you own this diamond, then you die or someone you love dies. That's what's happened throughout history. In the best possible case scenario, you just get hit with like horrible luck and lose all your money or some other horrible thing. There just really isn't any good way to spin this. Owning the Hope Diamond is pretty much a horrible idea. Number 2 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. Do not get on a boat if said boat is also carrying this mummy. Google Arts and Culture says the Unlucky Mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. Rumors of the curse soon spread, and in the early 20th century, journalist William Thomas Steed wrote an article on the jinxed artifact. Steed went on to be one of the passengers on the doomed Titanic. It's said that he told stories of the curse in the run-up to the disaster, with many believing that the mummy itself caused the ship's watery end. Today, the Unlucky Mummy is on display in the British Museum. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Enter in the Unlucky Mummy, and boom, now the unsinkable ship goes down. Maybe it's a stretch to say that this thing caused the literal Titanic crash, but I can at least guarantee that it probably didn't help. At least this thing is now locked up in a museum very much on land and not connected to any boats that I know of. And number 1 on this list is the Hands Resist Him painting. I'm all about having some cool, groundbreaking art, but this painting definitely crosses the line. The lineup says there is no doubt the painting is disturbing. It shows a young boy standing next to a girl doll with hollow eyes and a sad, downturned mouth. The doll is holding a strange device with wires coming out of it. it. The eeriest part of the painting are the many disembodied children's hands reaching toward the boy through the glass panels of a door just behind him. But even more disturbing than the painting itself are the stories of what has happened to people who come in contact with it. A few years after the painting was sold, the art critic Henry Seldes died. Then the gallery owner died. Then in 1984, John Marley died. The painting disappeared, not surfacing again until 2000 in a bizarre posting on eBay. The new owners were trying to sell it because they said it was haunted. They claimed the boy and the doll in the picture would fight with each other during the night, terrifying their 4-year-old daughter. They set up a motion sensing camera in the room for 3 nights and claimed they had captured the boy in the picture leaving the frame and coming into the room, apparently fleeing in terror. The literal kid in the painting is leaving. Not freaking cool, guys. My paintings are supposed to be static and not moving, and they definitely aren't supposed to be walking around my home scaring the living bejesus out of me and my family. Apparently, this painting is locked up in a storage locker now, and no one is allowed to see it.
Number 5 on this list is the Bassineau vase. The Bassineau vase is one of those old family heirlooms that you really don't want to get passed down to you. It started out as a wedding gift, also something that you really don't want to receive on your wedding day. Anyways, it's a pretty vase, so the couple accepted this vase, and then tragedy struck. On the night of the wedding, after the ceremony, the bride was found dead in her room. It's said that she had her hands wrapped around this vase as she was dying, and in her final breaths before passing, vowed to have her revenge. This little vow at the end muddles things because we're not sure whether it was the vow that cursed the vase or if the vase was already cursed, but whatever. Adding it to the story makes it a little bit more interesting, so she cursed the vase. Either way, at this point nobody realized that the vase had anything to do with the death of the young bride, which is really too bad. The vase turned into a family heirloom and was passed from generation to generation. As you can imagine, it didn't go so great for those who received this. More people kept dying, all of them extremely mysteriously. Eventually, somebody caught on and decided that this vase needed to get locked up for good. For a time, it was locked up in a secret location and nobody knew where this vase was. It should have stayed that way though. The vase in 1988 saw the light of day again and was sold off to a wealthy bidder who basically just bought an extremely expensive way to die. He died very soon after receiving this vase, and thus it began all over again. The vase exchanged hands some more, killing off more and more people as it went. Finally, somebody with some proactive thinking gave it to the police. Now, nobody knows where it ended up. Whether the police destroyed it, hid it, or held onto it is anyone's guess. Number 4 on this list is the chained oak. This one is really interesting, and even though history hasn't necessarily hidden it from us, it's definitely tried to negate the consequences. Atlas Obscura says, the chained oak is an old tree wrapped in chains to prevent its branches from falling. This is due to an alleged curse put on the tree when, in 1821, the 15th Earl of Shrewsbury refused a woman's pleas for money. It's said that she then put a curse upon the nearby oak. For every branch that falls from the tree, a member of the Earl's family would die. Later that night, one of the Earl's relatives died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Convinced that the curse was true, the Earl ordered that the branches of the oak should be chained up to prevent more from falling. I feel for that Earl's family, man. Like, literally, I'm just a grandkid of this dude, and now if this tree breaks a little bit, I'm gonna die? No thank you. At least the Earl had the sense to chain up the tree and make sure that it won't happen to harm his family. But one big storm rolls through that place and wham, now some random person is just dying. Just pray that you don't happen to be the descendant of this guy, and if you are, cross your fingers those chains were done up tight. Number 3 on this list is the baker's wedding dress. Marriage is supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life. Finding that partner you intend to spend the rest of your life with, and then actually doing just that. Therefore, one of the happiest days of your life should be the day that all of this becomes official. Your wedding day. That's why it's particularly sad when tragedy or drama occurs on the day of said wedding. Just that is exactly what happened with Anna Baker. Scoop Whoop says, inside the Baker Mansion in Altoona, USA is the wedding dress of Anna Baker, who fell in love with an ironworker. Legends claim that Anna eloped from her home to get married to her lover, but her father forcibly brought her back and locked her in her bedroom. She then refused to marry anyone else and spent the rest of her life alone. After her death, the members of the Baker family reported spotting Anna's wedding dress at different places around the house. Some of them even saw the spirit of Anna Baker moving around the house dressed in that same wedding dress. Imagine literally getting forced back home and locked in your room by your father as you're getting married. It's no wonder that Anna was pissed and why this specific object has become very cursed. Now it's locked up in a case and hidden from the world in the Baker mansion. It's a good thing that it is, because what Scoop Whoop didn't talk about is the fact that this dress can actually be dangerous. As ridiculous as it actually sounds, it has reportedly tried to strangle people in their sleep before. I know that the image of a floating wedding dress trying to suffocate somebody is kind of humorous, but I promise you that you wouldn't be laughing if it happened to you. I like that this thing is locked up, but would be far more comfortable if we just threw it in the fire and we're done with it completely. Number 2 on this list is the Anguished Man painting. The Anguished Man painting is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, a painting of a man in some very clear anguish. The thing is that this man doesn't really look all that human. He hardly has any facial features at all and almost looks a bit like a burn victim. Also, where his eyeballs should be, there's just these 2 gaping holes, and his mouth also looks like one giant hole with no end. Even without the haunting associated with this picture, it's already pretty scary, and I personally have no idea why anyone would want it in their home. That's exactly what Sean Robinson did though, and he quickly suffered the consequences. Scoop Whoop says, fascinated by the charm of the Anguished Man painting, Sean Robinson inherited the painting from his grandmother and decided to hang the painting on the wall of his house. Soon after that, Sean and his family started experiencing paranormal events like cracking of the doors in the middle of the night and sudden blood-curdling screams from nowhere. Sean's wife decided to investigate the origin of the painting and found that the artist who painted the painting killed himself, and before doing that, he mixed his own blood with the paint that he used in making the painting. Learning this, the couple decided to hide the painting in the basement of their house in Cumbria. So, the first thing about this story that is kind of questionable is how anybody could be fascinated by the charm of this thing. It's gross, and I don't like looking at it, let alone having it hanging in my home. The second thing that's super questionable is why we decided to hide it. I swear, none of these people have ever heard of fire before, guys. Like, great, thank you for hiding it from the world, this is helpful, but what would be even more helpful is if we just took a match and burned it so nobody ever has to deal with it again. I apologize to the artist who painted this thing, but if you're gonna use your own blood and make a haunted painting, then come on, man, kinda deserves to be burned. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Thomas Busby chair. This chair is freaking deadly, man, and even though it's pretty much safe from public use now, I still hate that it exists. Scoop Whoop says, popularly known as Busby's stoop chair, this wooden furniture is cursed by the spirit of Thomas Busby, who was known to ruthlessly murder people. Before getting hanged for his crimes, he requested to have a meal in his favorite local pub. Upon finishing his meal, he stood and said, "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit on my chair." And ever since then, 63 people who dared to sit on the chair met untimely and terrifying deaths. Later, the owner of the pub donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum UK, and it's still there, hung 1.5 meters off the ground to prevent any further deaths. Can you imagine owning that pub and being like, oh, no worries, 60 people have died in this chair, all is good. Like, how the heck did we allow 63 separate people to sit in this chair and die? And, okay, like, I'm happy that it's hanging 1.5 meters off the ground and nobody can sit in it, but guys, come on. This is literally a dangerous weapon that we have right here. The fact that this thing hasn't been totally dismantled is kind of ridiculous. What happens if somebody steals this chair and then decides, you know what, I'm gonna murder people with it without anybody finding out? Frankly, I think history should have hidden this thing a little bit better. Hopefully we don't hear any more murderous stories about it from here on out.
Number 5. The Anguished Man. The tale of this rather disturbing-looking painting is strange and steeped in mystery, but every scant piece of information we have on it is more unsettling than the last. The painting of a featureless man who seems to be screaming was apparently apparently painted by a deeply troubled artist who mixed his own blood with his paints in an effort to get the right shade of red. Not long after completing it, the artist took his own life, and the painting found its way into a woman's care. She kept it for many years, but claimed that once she put the painting up, her and her family began to see a dark, shadowy figure roaming about their house. At night, they would hear strange sounds like footsteps and crying. The woman took the painting down and kept it locked in her attic for 25 years until she died, leaving the painting to its current caretaker, Sean Robinson. Sean had been warned by his grandmother that the painting was haunted, but he thought little of it. Robinson kept the painting in his basement for about a decade before rediscovering it and putting it up. Once again, the family began seeing the dark, shadowy figure roaming the halls and hearing the sound of weeping and moaning during the night. Sean began leaving a camera on by the painting to try and get evidence of its paranormal nature, and upon reviewing the footage, heard some odd noises and saw evidence of doors opening and closing seemingly by themselves, and the painting falling over onto the ground. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense, with his wife seeing a strange mist and an unseen force pushing his son down the stairs. Things went from bad to worse when guests who came to see the painting began reporting intense and sudden nosebleeds. Sean takes the painting out from time to time to show it to paranormal investigators and television programs who want to hear his story, but otherwise, the anguished man is apparently kept locked away in a safe location to prevent any further harm from coming to unwitting people. Number 4. Robert the Evil Doll. We've all heard of the cursed Annabelle doll that has permeated pop culture for the last decade, but have you heard of Robert? Robert was a gift to a young boy of the same name, Robert Eugene Otto, from his grandfather. The grandfather had been traveling in Germany and came across the doll, who was not intended to be a toy, but a window display. He bought the doll for his grandson, who dressed it in a sailor's outfit that he had outgrown, and kept it with him at almost all times. As the young boy grew up, witnesses remember his relationship with the doll seemed to grow more and more unhealthy, with him referring to the doll as a living person and blaming mishaps on him. The boy, who went by his middle name, Gene, grew up to be an eccentric artist in a stately home known as the Artist's House. He kept Robert by the upstairs window, where children claimed to see him moving in and out of view. When Gene died in 1974, the new owner of the house, Myrtle Reuter, found the doll and became its new owner. Visitors of the house began reporting the sound of giggling and footsteps coming from the attic where the doll was being kept. When the doll was around people who spoke ill of its original owner, some claim that his facial expression seemed to change. After Myrtle got sick of the doll apparently moving around the home by itself and scaring guests for 20 years, she chose to donate Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Robert now resides in a locked display case to prevent the over 120-year-old doll from decaying further, but also to protect the visitors of the museum. But even those precautions don't seem to always work. Guests who insult Robert at the museum report experiencing tragedies in their lives not long after. This has ranged from people losing their jobs, getting divorced, breaking bones, getting into automobile accidents, and even a few deaths. The doll reportedly receives letters every day from admirers, people wanting the doll to curse their enemies, and a few from people asking Robert to reverse the curse they believe he has laid upon them. Number 3. The Women from Lem statue. This limestone statue, also known as the Goddess of Death, was discovered in Lem, Cyprus in 1878. Its purpose, or exactly what it was meant to portray, has been lost to time, but many experts believe it may be a fertility statue of an unknown goddess. Whatever the reason for the carving, experts have concluded that it was carved sometime around 3500 BC. After being found in 1878, it was purchased by a man named Lord Elfont. Within 6 years of having acquired the object, Elfont and all 6 of his family members had died under mysterious circumstances. The statue passed to a man named Ivor Manucci, who died along with his entire family within 4 years of the purchase. The same thing happened to its next owner, Lord Thompson Noel, and his family. The statue seemed to disappear for a time before being acquired by Sir Alan Biverbrook, who had a wife, 2 daughters, and 2 sons. Yet again, family members began to drop like flies, with Biverbrook, his daughters, and his wife all passing within a few years. Fearing that they would be next, Biverbrook's sons decided to donate the statue to the Royal Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, where it was soon put on display. However, the statue was not quite done, and the curator who had handled the statue mysteriously died the next year. The statue is still on display to this day, locked in a heavy glass display case. Number 2. Thomas Busby's chair. Our next entry takes us to North Yorkshire in 1702, when 2 criminals, Daniel Oddie and his son-in-law, Thomas Busby, came into conflict. They were coin forgers who essentially ran a criminal empire, but Daniel disapproved of Tom's relationship with his daughter. This resulted in a fight, which ended with Daniel's untimely demise. Thomas was arrested soon afterwards and sentenced to be. There is some variation in what happened next. Some versions of the tale say that Thomas was arrested at his favorite pub, and others say he was allowed back into the bar for his last drink before his death. Whatever the case, before being taken away, he told the other patrons of the pub, "May sudden death come to anyone who dare sit in my chair." He was then taken away and as the local historian and poet William Grange described it, the bones of the poor wretch who had committed murder to fester in the sunshine and blow in the tempest until they fell piecemeal to earth, and tradition yet tells tales of night wanderers being terrified when passing the dreaded spot. While Thomas began apparently haunting the spot across from the inn where his remains were displayed, the curse he laid on the chair began taking effect. Over the years, many brave souls sat on the chair to prove they were not afraid and paid the price. In 1894, a chimney sweep sat in the chair and was found the next day hanging next to where Busby had been displayed. In 1967, 2 Air Force pilots sat in the chair as a joke, but when they were driving home that night, they crashed into a tree and did not survive. A few years later, a builder sat in the chair and fell off a roof later that same night. Not long after, a cleaner fell into the chair after slipping while mopping the floor and died of a brain tumor soon after. In 1978, the owner of the now renamed Busby Stoop Inn decided that too many deaths had occurred and donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum. Although they didn't technically lock the chair away, they did hang the chair on the wall, 5 feet off the ground, to prevent anyone from sitting on it and receiving Busby's fatal curse. Number 1. The Bassano Vase. Although it has fallen out of favor now, for centuries, a common gift given to brides on the day of their weddings were intricate ornate vases. Our next tale begins in the 15th century Italy and spans over 500 years. Legend says that on the day of her wedding, a bride in a village near Napoli found a gift with no clue which of the guests had given it to her. It was a 4-pound silver vase. She decided to put it in her room for safekeeping before the wedding ceremony. But when the ceremony was due to start, the bride was nowhere to be found. The groom went to her room to look for her and found her lifeless body on the ground, with no trace of what had caused the death, other than her desperately clutching the silver vase. The bride was buried, and the vase was passed on to one of her family members to be taken care of. Within days, the second member of the family was dead from unknown causes. The vase was given to another member of the family, and when he also passed away, the family made the connection between all the recent tragedies and the Bassano vase. Unsure what to do, they reached out to a local priest who, upon hearing the story, informed them that whoever had given it to the bride had either cursed it or made it from cursed materials. He advised them to bury it on sacred grounds. They dug a hole and wrote a note warning, "Beware. This vase brings death," which they placed inside the cursed vase. The vase was buried and remained underground for the next 500 years. By horrible chance, a man in 1988 was digging and came across the vase. He read the note, but being the skeptical type, discarded it and took the newly found Bassano vase to a local auction house. The vase went up for auction and was sold for the equivalent of $2,270 to the local pharmacist. Within 3 months, the pharmacist was dead, and the vase was sold by his family to a local doctor, who also passed away soon after. The vase developed a reputation after this, and several people who were approached to purchase it refused, but it was eventually bought by an archaeologist who, despite his family's protests, did not believe in curses. He died 3 months later. His family threw the vase out their window, but a police officer who was passing by saw this and tried to return it. The family refused the vase back and told him of its cursed nature. He tried to give it to multiple different museums, but having heard about the curse, they all refused. Fearing for his his life, he did what the bride's family had done over 500 years prior, and buried it in a lead box in a cemetery. Which cemetery he used is unknown, but let us hope that no unwitting soul rediscovers this cursed vase and unleashes it upon humanity once again.
Upon entering the Warrens Museum, one of the first things you'll see is this frightening little shadow doll, made of bird feathers and real human teeth. The Warrens' son-in-law and current proprietor of the museum, Tony Spera, offers a bit of insight on the doll, saying it was originally acquired at an antique shop, where it was being sold, and the owners of the shop, being none the wiser of the doll's evil, had it for sale. That's totally on the antique shop owners though. You come into possession of a doll made of bird feathers and human teeth, your first instinct should be to bury it with some rosaries, not stick a price tag on it, but I digress. The doll's curse works by taking a photograph of the doll, and when it develops, writing the curse you'd like to inflict and sending it to your victim. The person who then opens the envelope and sees the doll in the photograph will invite the curse into your home. The real question I have about the shadow doll is, do you think it is jealous that it's not the most famous haunted doll in the Warrens collection? I know I'd probably have a hard time sitting next to Annabelle all day while everyone comes to gawk at my movie star sister. No wonder the doll is cursing people. If you're having fun, drop a subscribe and catch new scary videos every single day. Number 4. The brick from Borley Rectory. A brick? Okay, you're running out of ideas and it's only number 4. Well, bear with me, okay? It's not just the brick, it's the story behind the brick. And besides, a brick is actually pretty scary on its own. It doesn't even need to be haunted. Just imagine it being thrown into a window. Bam, very scary. Anyway, this particular cursed brick comes to us from Borley Rectory, one of the most haunted houses in the United Kingdom, and I gotta say, possibly one of the worst named buildings in the country. Borley Rectory sounds like a horrible medical infection. Borley Rectory could be its own video based on all the alleged hauntings and stories that have taken place in its hallowed walls. Since the 18th century, it's been home to all sorts of reported hauntings. It checks off all the usual requirements for a haunted domicile. To name a few: unexplained footsteps, ghostly apparitions, bells ringing without reason, whispers of a headless monk that would wander the halls, horse-drawn carriages being commandeered by a headless horseman, seeing shadows, and one ghastly nun who just maybe served as the inspiration for the nun from the film The Nun. There is a lot going on at this haunted building. So, naturally, it's a great spot for two famed demonologists, and sometime in the 1970s, Ed and Lorraine Warren ventured out to the UK to investigate the Borley Rectory and see if maybe they could put a plug in some of this. Upon entering, Lorraine declared almost immediately that she could feel the presence of a nun's spirit. So the pair took some photographs, and after developing the photographs, lo and behold was the ghostly apparition of a nun in the corner. Now obviously the story of the film is much different, and in the film The Nun, the Warrens only really appear for a Thanos-style cameo at the end, but you never know, this could very well have been the inspiration for that character. The brick serves as a souvenir and a remainder of one more haunting in their storied logbook. Number 3, the satanic idol and the human skull. No way. No way a satanic idol and a human skull are haunted. No way. The skull was given to the Warrens, apparently as a gift, and I sincerely hope they kept the gift receipts for that one, because it's not the kind of thing I'd like, but they probably loved it. Now, the satanic idol is a slightly different story. The tall, slender, bizarre idol doesn't immediately scream Satan or satanic, but all you need to do is take a single look at it to be unnerved. It's definitely not the kind of thing you'd ever want to be face to face with, or I don't know, see in a scary clearing in the woods. And yet for one lonesome hunter, that's exactly what happened. Apparently, the idol and the skull with it were taken from the woods nearby the Warren estate by a local hunter who had found them both. The hunter claims that he was approached by a man in mysterious black garb who ushered him away. Obviously, a little shaken and stirred by such a bizarre experience, went to the only people he thought he could trust with something like this, and he took the idol to the Warrens for safekeeping. Now, after he brought it to them, Lorraine Warren fell deeply ill almost immediately after bringing the idol into their home, with no one able to correctly diagnose what was happening to her. Ed believed that his family was being targeted for welcoming the idol into their home. You'd think that a pair of storied demonologists like this would have seen this coming, but you know, we all make mistakes. Lorraine recovered, obviously, and although no details emerged on how she did or what they did to purify and cleanse the idol, we can assume most likely it was probably blessed, exorcised, and doused in holy water of some kind. otherwise it wouldn't be fit to sit amongst their treasures. It now rests inside the museum, alongside all their other haunted relics, patiently waiting for Hollywood, where I've heard it's very open to hearing offers for a 3-picture deal and some spin-offs if that's on the table. Number 2. The organ. Now, one of the more mysterious items inside the museum is this big grand organ. Get your mind out of the gutter. It's a musical instrument, like a church organ. The church organ was recovered after authorities seized a haunted house in Connecticut. Having close ties to the Warrens, the authorities asked if there was anything they might like to retrieve from the site. The house burned down mysteriously not even days after the organ was removed. Ed Warren, lover of all things haunted and a good bargain, had a great interest in this organ, and keeping of his self-imposed duty of controlling haunted objects, took it upon himself to take it home. Obviously this thing was cursed, obviously. Ed Warren would say that he would hear songs being played from it discordantly throughout his home whenever no one was around. And when Ed would venture forth into his office to investigate it, the music would stop as soon as he opened the door. He says this would occur every time he tried to investigate it, happening 3 different times. Eventually, losing sleep over one more haunted relic, Ed Warren contacted a friend at the clergy to come bless it. He would have a priest come by every 2 weeks or so to bless his home and to bless every item in the museum to keep the spirits docile. It begs the question, with this much effort, why even keep cursed items in your home? The organ at least seems benevolent, but Annabelle, the skulls, the satanic idols, why them? Well, Ed and Lorraine believed by keeping these items under supervision, it meant they were safe from outside interference and no one else would be put at risk. The pair feared that if any of the cursed objects were destroyed or damaged, then they could release the spirits back into the world, free to cause more mayhem. This same reason is why, despite the passing of the Warrens, the museum is still kept up and open and maintained. And also so, paranormal ghouls and goblins like us can go check out all this spooky stuff and get some fantastic Instagram stories out of it. Number 1. The Conjuring Mirror. Hey, wait a second, there wasn't a particularly notable mirror in The Conjuring, are you trying to fool me? It was a haunted music box. Well, you're totally right. It was a haunted music box. This is a different thing, unrelated to The Conjuring, but related to The Conjuring in the sense that it was owned by Ed and Lorraine. Give it enough time, this might be in one of the movies. Over the years, you've probably heard all sorts of superstitions regarding mirrors. I'm sure you've heard that breaking one is 7 years of bad luck. But there are some who say that mirrors can be used as portals to other worlds, and can be used as the stage for all manner of ritual. It's even been said this is how Nostradamus was able to peer so deep into the future. This desire caught the attention of one Stephen Zellner, a Connecticut native who wanted to try a little soothsaying of his own. He acquired the mirror and performed a ritual on the art of claptromancy, dangling the mirror from a thread into a pool of water, where supposedly, if performed correctly, you'll be able to see visions in the reflections below. Well, as the story goes, for Zellner, it worked, and he saw brief glimpses of his future, but didn't see the spirits that had been kept inside the mirror, which he invited into his home, wreaking all manner of havoc on him. Doors would slam shut, drawers would fly open, objects would be hurled across the room, the poltergeist classics. Knowing that he'd invited something dark that he couldn't handle into his home, he reached out to the church for an exorcism and was referred to Ed and Lorraine. The pair exorcised the spirits back into the mirror, sealing them back. Knowing that it wasn't safe to leave the mirror in the hands of Zellner, the two offered to take it off of his hands, protecting and controlling the evil inside, and adding it to their collection of delightful cursed relics where it now resides. Number 4. The Iceman. The Iceman cometh for us all. In 1991, on the peak of the Ozzol Alps in Italy, a pair of mountaineering tourists came across what they thought was a deceased hiker, which in a grandiose sense was kind of true. Not a recent passing, however, because the Iceman in question was dated from 3000 BC. The nature of his passing is unknown, so the criminal could still be out there at large. A fascinating find for the scientific community. The Iceman, nicknamed Otzi after the mountain he was found in, shined a light on history previously unseen. Otzi was the oldest body ever discovered with tattoos. History's first bad boy, if you will. After being unearthed, the body was brought to Austria to be studied intensively, but nothing the researchers discovered could have prepared them for the curse that they had unearthed. A worrying amount of people involved in the study of the Iceman found themselves befelled to an ancient unearthed evil. The first man to discover Otzi, one of the hikers, fell off a path path on a mountain to his doom. A mountaineer passed in an avalanche. A forensic pathologist was involved in a lethal car accident en route to give a speech at a university about the Iceman. In total, 7 researchers involved in the study of the Iceman and observers found themselves losing their life after meeting him. So where is the Iceman now? Hopefully supervised? Well, Ötzi is currently being held in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology down in the bottom of Italy, where he is kept in a climate-controlled environment to maintain his preservation. Locked away, visitors are permitted to come see the Iceman, but only through a frozen, thick glass window. Is that room to keep him cool and preserved? Or is it to keep whatever curse lay dormant inside his bones docile? All we know is that we're thankful that Ötzi's just chillin'. Number 3. The Woman of Lem. Now, modern art can be a bit confusing. It's hard to understand an artist's true meaning behind their work, especially when things start to get abstract. Looking at the Woman from Lem statue, it's hard to even make out what this is supposed to be. A fertility statue? Primitive bog roll holder? You wouldn't even know just by looking at it just how lethally cursed this statue is. We don't know who crafted this or why, but we do know that under no circumstances whatsoever should you ever touch the Woman of Lem statue, lest you're looking to incur the wrath of a centuries-old evil. The statue was first uncovered in 1878 in Lem, Cyprus, giving the statue its name. Carbon dating suggests the statue was formed around 3000 BC. Hey, wait a minute. Do you think Ötzi the Iceman ever saw this statue? You think maybe it's the same curse? Was life just significantly more cursed back then? Now back on hand to the topic. Once the statue was found, it began to wreak havoc almost immediately. Legend says 4 families are purported to have lost someone after touching the statue. The first owner, one Lord Elfont, a lord during Cyprus's time as a colony, lost 7 members of his family after acquiring the statue. Sometime afterwards, the next lord to acquire it, Ivor Minucci, obtained the statue and lost his entire family in the span of 4 years. The next victim, one Lord Thompson Knoll, just like the others, his family passed away within 4 years. The stories say that eventually, his remaining surviving sons, understanding that they had a responsibility to rid themselves of this generational evil, gave the statue off to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh for safekeeping, or maybe just to pass the curse along like a vicious cycle of regifting. Within a year, the museum curator passed away mysteriously. Right now, it's still kept there, locked away behind a glass box, never to be touched again by human hands. Let's try and keep it that way. Number 2, the Hope Diamond. Now the Hope Diamond has shown up a few times on this channel before, and for good reason. It's considered one of the most haunted objects on the planet. The diamond was first uncovered in India, with reports claiming that the diamond was plucked from the eye of a statue of the goddess Sita, the goddess of beauty and devotion. Legend has it that the first person who ever stole the diamond was attacked by dogs shortly after taking it. From here, the diamond made its way through countless hands, never staying in one pair of hands for too long though. It's said to have been owned by King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who as far as I know, never had anything too bad happen to them. You know, at least nothing worth losing your head over. That's a little history joke for you. Look up the French Revolution, or Assassin's Creed Unity. It's the same thing. Throughout the diamond's storied history, it's been said that just about every owner of the Hope Diamond suffered a horrific fate. 14 confirmed deaths and owners throughout history, and that's only the ones we know of, as there could be countless more. The jeweler who recut the stone into its current form, William Falls, died a ruined man in poverty and hardship after his son Hendrik stole the stone from his father, who would later be prompted to take his own life as repentance for his crime. After passing from owner to owner under grisly circumstances, it finally made its way to Harry Winston, an American jeweler who, possibly making the first smart choice of anyone on this list, thought it better to play with his odds, and donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in 1958, where it currently resides sealed away to this day. So what happened when it became museum property? Well, the curators of the Smithsonian were thrilled to receive it, and have said that they consider the gem a crown jewel of their diamond collection, and that in all the time it's been in their watch, no one has suffered any ill effects, and if anything, visitors have gone up. Maybe Indiana Jones was right. Maybe it belongs in a museum. Number 1, King Tut. Now, number 1 on our list might be a little bit esoteric. It's the curse of King Tutankhamun, so not quite an object, but worth noting. King Tutankhamun, or King Tut as his close friends like to call him, is arguably the most famous pharaoh of all time. Uncovering his tomb was a landmark moment in Egyptology and archaeology, with his tomb serving as something of a golden goose for archaeologist Howard Carter, who spearheaded the excavation attempts of King Tut's tomb. It took years upon years of concentrated efforts hunting for it, but in 1922, Howard Carter, under the commission of Lord Carnarvon, uncovered the late pharaoh's mighty tomb. Howard Carter, Lord Carnarvon, and their companion Evelyn Beauchamp, the daughter of Carnarvon, were the first people to ever step inside King Tutankhamun's resting place in centuries. Unfortunately, it wouldn't go so well for them. The first victim was Lord Carnarvon. Upon entering the tomb, he was bitten by a mosquito, and mere weeks later, the bite became deeply infected, poisoning his blood, leading to a loss of life. The author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, upon reading this story in the news, had theorized that there was a curse put in place by the old gods watching over Tutankhamun's tomb. And that's the guy who created Sherlock Holmes, so let's assume he's probably pretty smart and doesn't just jump to conclusions. The next victim, George Gould, was a visitor to the tomb who developed an intense fever shortly after walking through it. Within months, he had passed away. Next was A.C. Mace, a digger on the excavation team, passed from an intense case of pneumonia shortly after his involvement. Howard Carter's secretary, Captain Bethel, was the next victim, passing away 6 years after the unearthing under mysterious circumstances, believed to have been smothered in his sleep. Now, Howard Carter, the original excavationist who helmed the venture, didn't believe anything about the curse, claiming that it was all superstition and coincidence, not fitting an educated man. He complained, however, that after unearthing the tomb, whenever he would visit Egypt, he noticed repeated sightings of jackals, the same type of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. Which, I've gotta say, if I recently uncovered a legendary pharaoh and interrupted his slumber to plunder his riches for my personal gain, I would probably be a bit wary about seeing a symbol of the god of the dead following me around. 16 years later, Howard Carter would pass away of Hodgkin's disease. Could he have been the last victim of the curse, or did he manage to escape its throes? The king still rests in his tomb in Cairo, where he shall not be disturbed. You're more than welcome to go visit him if you'd like, but please, be respectful.